live stream it, you can give all the contribution authority there. I think what I did last night. Yeah. Okay. You are set. You're good. Go ahead.
So good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank, my name is Ken Phillips. I'm General Manager of the St. Clair Conservation Authority, and I'm very thankful for the Township of Warwick for giving me the opportunity tonight to come and speak to you about things you can do with your own property around flooding. Of course, Warwick Township had a major flooding event in August of 2023. So I'm going to touch on a little bit about that, speak a little bit about conservation authorities, who we are, what we do, and just try and get you better informed and better prepared in the event that there's another storm. So we do have some nice slides to show and some stories to go along with those slides. As soon as we get them up, we are experiencing technical difficulties, as is always the case. So I believe we're up and well, you've jumped ahead, but that's okay. There we go. So the title of my presentation this evening is called Weathering the Storm, Useful Tips to Protect Your Home from Severe Weather Events. Just going to start off quickly explaining what a conservation authority is to folks. So we are geographically based organizations. We are based on watershed boundaries, so not political boundaries. There are 36 conservation authorities in the province of Ontario. All of Southern Ontario is covered, and then the 5 major centers in Northern Ontario as well have conservation authorities. We all vary in size, capacity, scale, just like the municipalities that we represent. So the largest authority from a financial standpoint is Toronto Region. They have an operating budget around 200 million. And Sault Ste. Marie Conservation Authority is the smallest from a budgeting perspective, with around $600,000, $700,000 operating budget. So in terms of the St. Clair watershed, we were established in 1961 as the Sydenham Valley Authority. We became the St. Clair Conservation Authority in 1974 with expansion. So we now look after the 2 branches of the Sydenham River, a small portion of Lake St. Clair, the St. Clair River, and a chunk of Lake Huron. Our watershed is 4,130 square kilometers in size. Our head office is located in Strathroy. So as I joke to our board, we are in the handle of the pot, if you want to look at our watershed boundary being that way. And I do represent 17 member municipalities. We also have 3 First Nations within our watershed boundaries that we work in step with. Very much a broad effort in terms of our size and scope, and making sure that we serve our municipalities to the best we can. So a lot of people think environmental concerns are new. They are not. The conservation authorities were first formed in 1946. There was very strong concerns about environmental conditions in the province of Ontario dating back to the 1920s and 30s. And the primary focus of conservation authorities originally was to improve the landscape of Ontario, plant trees, do stewardship works, make it a more vibrant and ecologically sound province. But then a major event happened in 1954, and that was Hurricane Hazel, and it swept through Toronto, and it was a horrific storm. 81 people were killed, 4,000 left homeless. Cost $138 million in damage, which is $1.5 billion in 2023 dollars. If you look at the 2 slides we have in the lower photo, you'll see the houses drawn on the map. Those were houses used to be there. Those 14 houses were washed away and 36 people were killed along the Don Valley, I believe it was. The other photo is the remnants of a fire truck. So the first official casualties of Hurricane Hazel were 5 firefighters who were swept away off a bridge on their truck. So because of the impact of the storm and the enormity of it, the province decided they needed to do something. So they then, because they've created these agencies that were based on watershed boundaries, which would help control river flooding, they tasked conservation authorities with flood control for the prevention of loss of life and property. And in the history of authorities, you'll notice a lot of them are formed after 1954, mostly between 1956 and early 1960s. You'll see this whole broad spectrum. The newest authority, was formed in 1979, and that's the Kawartha Conservation Authority was the last one formed. But the Hurricane Hazel then becomes what's called the regional storm standards. That is the worst storm you can expect in a 250 to 500 year time period. That was deemed as the worst you're going to see. And that was the storm standard for which we use most of our floodplain mapping to gauge. So in terms of flood forecasting, how do we do it? We have a network of 11 stream gauges, 5 snow sampling sites, which is exactly what it sounds like. We send out staff to measure snow in the wintertime to get an understanding of how much water is in the snowpack. Our stream gauges, the best way to describe them, if you're driving by a bridge, you see looks like a little outhouse, a little metal shack by the bridge, chances are that's a stream gauge. And that has monitoring equipment in it, keeps track of the flow, water flows, water quantities. We also do ice monitoring. Because of the size of our watershed, we do have trouble with ice in the southern portion, particularly Wallaceburg, because of just where it's located. And we also collect daily meteorological information as well. So we have a number of weather stations. Do we have enough? No, we will tell you that we need more. But so we've been pressuring the province and the federal government to start investing into making this more invigorating. And I will explain to you as we move forward how this creates a bit of a challenge for us in the storm event that we recently had here. So there are 2 types of flooding, just to clarify. So there's riverine flooding, which occurs when water levels of rivers rise, overflowing their banks. And that's what we control from our regulation standpoint. There's also urban and pluvial flooding, which is flooding of streets, basements, that type of thing, over low-lying areas in municipalities. That's because of overflows of local drainage systems, so on. So the municipalities are responsible, but we do work with them in terms of examining the infrastructure they're going to put in, making recommendations about things they can do. And these types of storms, the picture on the bottom right, generally you're going to see these types of storms every 2 to 5 years. You're going to have some flooding. And it's just it's not pleasant for people, but we would classify it as nuisance flooding. It doesn't really cause major damage, but it does cause enough trouble that it is a concern. So looking at the storm that we had here, the problem we're facing now is while we have the regional storm standards and what's called a 1 in 100 year storm, the nature of storms are changing. So what's happening is what are now called supercell storms. So in Warwick Township on the 23rd, you had somewhere between 100 and 150 millimeters of rainfall in 6 hours. So the photo in the top right, the portion in white is Glencoe. And based on the chart on the side, our staff had never seen white before. So that's almost 6 inches of rain in that area. And then you're just outside of that area. So these are very common storms in my time in conservation. Peterborough received 2 of these storms in 2001 and 2001, one in 2003. Toronto, Hamilton, Burlington, London have all experienced this type of storm. The challenge with it is it's very confined. So that it's only so many kilometers wide and so many kilometers long, but the intensity of it creates overwhelming problems for storm sewers and those types of things. So it's how do you manage? In fact, in this instance, we had obviously the closure of the 402. There was, and that's not something you see rarely, that a 400 series highway becomes so inundated. But having experienced this type of storm before in Burlington myself, same thing happened on the 407. Hamilton, when they had their event, same thing happened on the Red Hill Creek Expressway. They just can't contain and move the water quick enough. So in terms of how challenging these storms are for us, these are 2 graphs that show the storm rainfalls. So the one is in Alveston. The closest gauge to Warwick and Watford is in Alveston. And you'll notice it had 124 millimeters of rain over a 6-hour period, whereas our gauge in Wallaceburg had 45. So, there's a big discrepancy. And even if you'd have gone just past Petrolia, you probably wouldn't have got any rain at all. You would have seen big black clouds in the distance. So it gets very challenging because you don't know when these storms are going to occur. They're very hard to forecast, very hard to predict. and it just creates bigger challenges for us as we go. So obviously it taxes municipal services, taxes municipal abilities to be able to prevent these types of damage to happen. And so, as I said, we're working very closely with the feds in the province to try and make sure that we have adequate resources to better forecast these things and help our municipal partners. But what generally can we do then? Because this is a big event, big storm event. You know, what can I do for my property? Well, there's a number of things we can look at. So what to do? So the easiest thing to do as a homeowner, look where your downspout is. Make sure, first of all, make sure your eaves troughs are clean. But where's your downspout? Is it facing just dumping right off of the base of your house? Is it pointed towards a window? Is it, or even in some cases, is it connected directly to a storm drain, which they shouldn't be because it inundates. And I know that is some problems in some municipalities. So you got to make sure they're facing away. If you want to know how much damage one of these can cause, a good anecdotal story. Friend of mine, they'll get a new house built, went to see the house, 4 feet of water in the basement. Went to talk to the builder, what's going on? We don't know. They investigated, downspout pointed right in the window of the basement. And so it just flooded over time. So you got to make sure. So what can you do? Well, the simplest method is looking at what's called extenders. So the picture, the lower photo shows a picture of that. So you push the water, use one of these little extenders, you can stretch them out, move it away from your home, put it on the downslope of your property, get it away from the foundation of the home, and then hopefully you can ease some of your problems that way. It's just a simple thing, but it's something to look at if you're a homeowner. Because one of the challenges you face is that stormwater infrastructure in most older towns and cities isn't designed for massive storms like we see. So initially in 50, 60 years ago when the infrastructure was put in, 1 in 50 year storm standard seemed like a good idea. Why? Because they weren't worried about flooded basements, because no one was putting in multi-$1,000 unit entertainment systems and finishing their basements. So it wasn't a concern. The basement flooded, it flooded, not a huge problem. But that's just one simple trick. Another one you can look at for flooded basements is improve your window seals or new windows in general. If you live in an older home, so 30, 40, 50 years old, haven't replaced the basement windows, chances are there's some rot is taken in, you're going to get flooding through there. But if you can't afford to do your windows, a simple solution on the top right photo there is just a cover. It's a big plastic cover. You stick it on the side of your house and it will divert water away from your window well to help prevent that. Other things to consider are sump pumps. I'm sure in this area, most people are familiar with sump pumps, but I can give you an example of a storm in city of Hamilton where there's 2 subdivisions literally across the road from each other. The one subdivision builder put sump pumps in all the houses. The other subdivision builder didn't. And they had the exact same storm, similar situation, massive downfall of rain. All the houses with sump pumps were fine. All the houses without sump pumps flooded. So it's just one of those things to consider. If you have one, get one installed potentially to help out with that. The other is backwater valves. So this is once again, any major cities that have had flooding, one of the challenges is the backwater. So that's literally sewer water coming up in your home. So the backwater valve will block that water when it's pushing back into your home and help to prevent flooding. So that's something you can look at as well. Another key thing as well is inspection and repair of your foundation. Modern building standards, they're required to put a plastic membrane around the inside of your wall in your basement, which helps push water back down into the system and then out to your sump pump or wherever it's going to go. So older homes, any type of foundation issue, water's a magical thing. It can find where it wants to go and it's going to get there and it'll find the easiest route to get there. So, but those are just a couple of smaller things. And all of these things, by the way, are available at your local hardware stores or easy to find online. These aren't major things. You have to search to that one place somewhere obscure to find them. Another thing you can do, getting more creative, is looking at your backyard flooding. So in some of the major cities, conservation authorities actually review people putting in pools. And you're thinking, what does a pool have to do with the conservation authority? Well, because what you're doing is you're paving over your backyard, you're putting a concrete, plus you're putting a massive amount of water in there. So if there's a major storm, that water has nowhere to go. It's going to flood out all your neighbors. So you just got to kind of make sure that, the impact will be negligible. But if you're looking at improving your home, things you can do are rain barrels. So the picture you'll see up in the upper right corner, very standard rain barrel system set up. So you get a free water supply for your gardens. But people kind of they don't like the look of these rain barrels, but I stress to you, there are so many different types and beautiful variations of rain barrels now. It's certainly worthwhile taking a look into that. Another thing is rain gardens. So the photo, if you have a low-lying spot in your lawn that naturally draws water, you can turn it into a nice little garden, or what's called a rain garden. So it's almost like a little wetland in your property. So you can grow flowers in there. There are all sorts of different types of plants you can use, and it will help you take some of that water away from the house and absorb it and get it into the ground faster, so you're not dealing with major flooding events. Also important is planting of trees, vegetation. So as a conservation authority, we obviously do large scale tree plantings and plant tens of thousands of trees a year and do major stewardship projects, getting people, but that's exactly why, because they do help to stabilize soils, they do help to absorb water and hold back water as well, and to some degree. So these are just some of the smaller things you can do. Another thing you can look at doing, and this is if you're looking at redoing your driveway or doing a major, so if you're a business owner and you're looking at doing a major infrastructure project, what you can do, well, you reduce hardened surfaces. So there are numerous types now of permeable surfaces you can use for parking lots, driveways. Does it cost a little more? Yes, but they work magnificently. They help to recharge the groundwater, far more easy access. You still have that hardened surface to park your car on. But it's just something to consider if you're so willing to do that. So I've given you quite a bit of information, and you're thinking, where can I learn more? Well, as luck would have it, the St. Clair Conservation Authority will be getting more of these books out for distribution. So we do have, been working in conjunction, a project devised by the Toronto Region Conservation Authority, and graciously given to us to help use. This book is about a 50-page book, and it literally everything I've spoken about is explained how to do in here in detail. So if you need to know grades and elevations and how to set up a rain barrel and what is good for your property, it's all located within this book. And the picture on the lower right includes a graph of how you can map out your property and how you stake out your property and how you would go ahead and do these improvements in your property. So these are all tricks that am I going to guarantee your house isn't going to flood? No. Am I going to tell you that some of these things will help mitigate the damage you receive? Yes, there's all sorts, that's really what we're trying to achieve today, is just giving you some information so you're aware. So we will be having these books available later in the year. We're supposed to be getting a new shipment of them in, so we'll try and make sure that there's some available here at Warwick Township for you to come in and take. And with that, I would certainly like to thank staff and council for their time today. And if there's anybody anywhere online or at home has questions, I'd be more than happy to take.
Okay, thank you very much, Ken, for that presentation. Appreciate everyone who could attend online and in person today. This video will remain on YouTube for those who are interested in accessing it in